The Interim Committee on the Judiciary, our fifth meeting, and I call the meeting to order. Would our clerk please call the roll?
Senator Berg. Present. Senator Carroll.
Here.
Senator Deneen. Here. Senator Neal. Senator Schickel. Senator Stivers. Senator Storm.
Here.
Senator Turner. Here. Senator Wheeler. Representative Banta. Representative Blanton. Representative Bratcher.
Here.
Representative Bray.
Present.
Representative Burke.
Here.
Representative Decker.
Present.
Representative Dietz.
Here.
Representative Flannery.
Here.
Representative Herron. Representative Kulkarni.
Present.
Representative Lewis. Representative Maddox. Representative Mosier.
I'm here.
Representative Nemus.
Here.
Representative Petrie. Representative Rawlings.
Here.
Representative Sharp. Representative Stevenson. Representative Wilson. Co-Chair Westerfield. Co-Chair Elliott.
I'm here, and I think Co-Chair Westerfield will join us momentarily, so he is here in the building, so he will join us soon, hopefully. Does any member have a guest that they would like to introduce? Senator Storm?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to introduce my daughter, Carly, who's with me today. She's on fall break, so what better way to spend fall break than here in Frankfort?
And we were at a country ham Casey County Farm Bureau auction last night, so she's had quite a week. So welcome to Frankfort. Senator Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The young man seated back there to the right is my nephew, David Turner, that just got sworn in to be a practicing lawyer Tuesday. He's here with me today, so welcome him, and he may be back down here later on in life. So thank you all.
Congratulations. Welcome. Representative Rawlings, he has someone.
I'd like to recognize our Commonwealth attorney, Lewis Kelly, and he's doing a great job for Boone County, and we're really happy and pleased with his work and being part of our community.
Yeah, thank you. Welcome. Welcome. So the first, do we have a quorum?
Yeah, we do.
Okay, so we do have a quorum. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? There's a motion, there's a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye, those opposed, no. And the minutes are approved. We're going to go out of order this afternoon on our agenda. And the first item that we will take up is the 2022 Crime in Kentucky report. And we have on Zoom Commissioner Burnett and Chief Villarreal, I believe. Is that right? Are they on Zoom with us? So if we can pull them up, please. Thank you for being here today.
Okay. Yeah. Ask again.
Oh, would you please unmute Commissioner Burnett and Chief Villarreal? Can you hear us? We can see you. Hi.
Yes, sir. I could not hear you a minute ago. I think you're on mute, or the session.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. I can hear
Great.
you loud.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Is the chief on as well?
Yes, sir. I'm here.
Thank you. Good to see you. Thank you for joining us.
I'm here. Yes, sir. Likewise.
So my attention was drawn to a report from WDRB related to a discrepancy in the numbers in the 2022 Kentucky crime report, and those numbers that were reported by Louisville Metro. I don't know, have either of you had a chance to see that report from WDRB?
Yes, sir, I have.
What response, since you've had an opportunity to see that report, what response would you have to that the crime numbers in the 2022 report are incorrect.
Yes, sir. And first, I'd like to apologize for not being able to attend in person. I already had a trip scheduled with my wife, so I'm via from a fire department in South Carolina, or I would have been there.
Well, sorry to interrupt your.
No, that's fine. This is I wanted to be here to be able to discuss. And yes, sir, I am aware of that. And I have a Chief Villarello and I, we have discussed this. And what I can tell you is, crime in Kentucky is a report that Kentucky State Police generates from all agencies across Kentucky. And we submit that report in July of each year that would detail the events, the crime data for the previous year. And what that report does, it actually is a snapshot in time. It's consistently changing based on updates that come in from other agencies. The repository or the data that we use, Kentucky State Police, we utilize what's called KYOPS. That stands for Kentucky Open Portal Solutions. And every agency in Kentucky utilizes that reporting system except for 4 private entities, and one of those is LMPD. So when we ran our stats from all the submissions that had come in, we ran those, including the 4 private ones that were submitted, and those were formulated for crime in Kentucky, in which we formulated and submitted that. When it was brought to issue that there was some discrepancies in crime data, particularly that involving LMPD. And when we become aware of that, then we reached out to our partners at LMPD, and we're trying to figure out, what the issue was, because our systems showed what we had to report. And talking with them, they had reported their data. They had reported those numbers. But what the issue is here is where LMPD is one of the 4 entities that does not utilize KYOPS. We have to use a different system to capture that data. So that data from these private agencies is submitted monthly. In our conversations and trying to work through this to make sure we have the accurate numbers, and our technology people work with LMPD, and we're trying to figure out the issue. And what we determined is during the year of 2022, or right there towards the end, is that LMPD utilized a records management system that was iLeads. But then they transitioned over to another reporting system by the name of Mark 43. During that when they submitted that data from the new Mark 43, we received it in March of 2023. So LMPD did submit their data, they did submit it, but the issue was there was a large submission of crime data at that time, and then our computer systems interpreted that to be March of 2023 data for the 2023 year. It did not recognize that with 2022 because of the new reporting system that they had transitioned to. If it would have still been iLeads, which is what they did have, that's what our system was set up to capture. But with this change, we still had the data. They still had it submitted, but the only thing it was a technology issue with our computer software recognizing that. So those numbers, if this would not have been brought to light, would have still been carried, but then it would have looked like 2023 numbers were absorbent because it was pulling over from 2022 data. So that was the issue dealing with that. We worked with LMPD how to correct the issue and what solutions where this doesn't happen again. So what we're doing, we're looking at a different type of software to more accurate be able to capture data from the 4 entities that do not utilize KYOPS. And also another thing is that when at the end of a year, for those 4 entities that do not utilize the KYOPS platform, that use another entity, is that we are going to ask them to submit just a form that is describing what crime data they have. And that will be in a separate block and submission in the Crime in Kentucky reporting. And it'll also be signed off on the agency head. And that way we can accurately report what crime data that they've submitted. And that way that's just not a technology issue with software trying to interpret that. So basically that's it in a nutshell, why that happened, that it did not capture that accurately.
Well, thank you for your response. I guess my question is, at what point did you intend to let the public know that this report wasn't correct? It looks like it almost took an investigative report. So at what point did you know that the information was wrong? Because clearly it was conveyed as correct in the 2022 report. For instance, 221 serious offenses, 221,973 offenses reported in 2022. And these offenses would be homicides, assault, fraud, sex offenses, Group A offenses, which are required under state law to be compiled in the crime report. The correct number was actually 239,265. So I guess my question is, how are we going to correct this, and at what point did you become aware of this, and what steps were taken to correct it? Because it's clearly, as the headline indicates, LMPD says none of its crime numbers are correct in the report.
Well, and it took some time for us to be able to decide or be able to figure out what the issue was, because we've not had this issue before. And our software showed that that's the data that we had received. And then after we contacted LMPD, and they said, no, this is what we submitted. So it took some time to figure out through that on the technology side exactly what happened. And with that, Crime in Kentucky is a report, and as I mentioned earlier, Crime in Kentucky is a document that changes consistently, because consistently crime data is updated throughout the year, even through previous years. So, like even since we ran the initial report, you take out the discrepancies, still that data changes. For instance, an assault, we have upgraded to a homicide for that. So it takes time for those to be able to update. So what we had planned to do is what we have done in every other year is when we run Crime in Kentucky for 2023 or 2023, then what that would be submitted, and that will be updated on that form for that particular year. We always update based on those statistics from the year prior to.
Thank you. Chief, do you have any comments you'd like to make or at this point?
Yes, sir.
The floor.
Yes, sir. And good afternoon. And just like the commissioner, I would have loved to have been there in person, but I'm actually in a training conference with Major City Chiefs and IACP. But I would like to just say that, yes, we did submit our data correctly to the reporting entity in order for it to be reported accurately and in a timely fashion. And I do agree with the commissioner, it was a system error. So what do we do now? How do we move forward to ensure that this doesn't happen again? I do have that background from my previous agency and working with data and making sure that our numbers are accurate. That was my responsibility. So with my team, we will actually go a step further and make sure that we're reporting our data to the commissioner's team on a monthly basis to make sure that there's accuracy and making sure that we're checking off on this so that at the 9th hour, we won't be in a position where there may be an upset in how the data is being reported and make sure that everybody is comfortable with that. And so I'm going to task my team in order to do that. They should be doing it now, but I'll make sure that it is done with urgency, so that we can continue to be on the same page. So I would like to also to say the commissioner and I, we have a great working relationship thus far. Anything that I need from his team and anything he needs from my team, we try to ensure that we accommodate one another. And so with this particular scenario, we want to make sure that we won't be in this position again where it looks like we're dropping the ball. And that's just not what we want to do. And that's not what we want the public to actually think that we're doing. And so that's my position on that, ensuring that we will get into a space moving forward that this does not happen again. And I would like to also say that within the last 8 years, we have not had this particular glitch. And so that's the historical backing that I received from my team. And it would also to have been confirmed by the commissioner's team as well.
Thank you for your response and for being here today. Are there any questions amongst the membership? Co-chairman or Chairman Westerfield.
Thank you, Chairman. Commissioner in Chief, thank you both. And I want to give you my thanks for making the accommodation to show up here. I know you'd both would prefer to be in person, but you're both kind enough to make time where you are with not a ton of notice over the last couple of weeks. So I really appreciate that. Chief, are you all still using the same Mark 43 platform that the commissioner spoke of?
Yes, sir. That is a new RMS system that we just onboarded and operating within it within its fullness. It takes a minute to transition to a new RMS system. The old system was just not meeting the standards. And so now we're fully enthralled within this new system. Yes, sir.
Are there other states that utilize that platform?
Yeah. Yes, sir. It's other states that use that from my previous
municipalities?
agency. I'm sorry.
Or
repeat
other
that.
municipalities, I guess.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. My previous agency, the Atlanta Police Department, I was on the beginning stages of them onboarding Mark 43, where we had to roll out all this training for the department wide. So I'm very familiar with the platform, and other agencies do use Mark 43. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Is it using a UOR code, or how is it identifying the offenses on the LMPD side, and then what is KSP seeing on their side of the report from LMPD?
So everybody should be using the same code, UCR, and also to making sure we're in NIVER's compliance, and that we are, and it does mirror within Mark 43. And so when that data, as the commissioner has indicated, when you're running our data, and if the technician on the other side of that platform does the same running of coding that they use for the other agencies that are UNKY ops, it will do, if you will, for example, an inverse. You have to do the reverse for our data to receive the accuracy in which it should be yielding. And so again, it could be the coding on that, the query on that, and how you're extracting the data, but all the data should be the same because we're using the same codes because we have to be in compliance.
And this is my next question is for either of you or for both of you. Have you all now reconciled the differences between what LMPD has reported and what state police has? And if you have, which number is right? Or which numbers are right?
The numbers that we submitted are right. And then Commissioner, you can jump in and explain when it's going to be reported and show.
Yes, we have updated those. As I said, that consistently changes from crimes that may have been reported previously, or they could have changed the status of an investigation as possibly an assault to a homicide, or it could be a stolen vehicle that they determined that was taken by a family member, some of those issues. But yes, we have established numbers going forward dealing with those crime stats. Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are you all just gonna, when you issue the 23 report, double check those numbers, or do you all plan to issue a corrected 22 report?
What we plan to do is what we've done in the years past is just we will update that when we submit to Crime in Kentucky for next July, and it will be updated for this year or for 2022. My apologies.
I'd make a request here. I don't have another question, but I'd make one request. It might be helpful to identify in your next report the number of cases that are corrected cases, not new cases, if that makes
Yes,
sense.
yes, sir, it does. That's what we plan to do.
All right. Thank you. Thank you
Yes, sir.
both.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Senator Carroll has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank both of you for attending today. So, Commissioner, help me understand. When you all discovered this issue, was it before or after the investigative report was released?
It was after, sir.
Okay. All right. And were there any communications with Louisville Metro about the change in the software prior to that happening?
Prior, no, there was not, because we did not see that there was an actual issue. Because when we do this report, we're just a repository. We're just, all thing we're doing is putting together the numbers submitted.
Yes,
We don't analyze crime reports from any other agency. We're just a repository for that. So we just did not see it until that was brought to the issue.
Chief, why did you all not notify KSP of the change?
KSP, they've been working with us already within our system as far as Mark 43, because there were some other things we've had communication, some other things within our system that we wanted the capability to view and to have. And so we've been in communication about our system changeover moving forward. So when the reporting and these numbers being reported out, and again on KSP side as to what is going into how it is spinning has to be totally different from how they're retrieving it and how they're running a report from the other agencies outside of the 4 that's not in KYOPS. So therefore, our numbers and our reporting system is still the same. And when we gave the dump, it was still in that same file that we normally use. So again, truly a technical error was made. Now we understand it, now we know it. And just like, how can we get into a space that this doesn't happen? I think it's just more accountability and checks and balances on both of our parts to ensure that on a monthly basis, these numbers are being provided on the other side, acceptance of those numbers and verifying that they do have it moving forward. I think that's going to be the best course of action.
So KSP was aware that you all were changing before this happened. In the data that you all submit, the format did not change with your new system. Did I hear that?
From my understanding, from my reports manager, director, the format in which we're dumping in those numbers into the file did not change. And of course, Mark 43, us changed to a new RMS system. It's not an overnight thing at all. We've been in a process of fully onboarding this system since I arrived in Louisville in 2021. So it's just really not a quick. So we've been navigating these waters for some time. Again, it's just those systems not speaking, or the query that's being run, it was a little off. So therefore, that's why we're in this situation that we are in. But again, not blaming anyone, just totally honest with you, not blaming anyone. It is truly a technical deficiency that happened.
And if so the reports are submitted monthly, is there not an annual report that you all submit in conjunction with the monthly reports as a check and balance for the accuracy of the monthly totals?
So there is an annual report. So I'm implementing on my side a monthly. So that is going to be an additional checks and balance layer that I'm going to implement, that I am implementing with my unit,
Okay,
just to safeguard.
Was there an annual report submitted in 2022 by Louisville Metro?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Commissioner,
Those are
help,
the numbers in which
Commissioner, help me resolve if there was a annual report submitted, is that not cross-checked with each monthly report to ensure the totals are accurate?
What that is, sir, for us and how we capture this is obviously different. But what that is we call it a year in tape, and they go by monthly submissions. But when LMPD changed to Mark 43, we received a different dump with what that's called in March of 2023. And what that is, our system recognized that as information for 2023, but that dump we received from them in March of 23 was their 2022 data. That is why our system saw it as 2023 and not 2022.
Okay, and Mr. Chairman, please forgive me.
Yes, you may continue.
I'm confused. So there was a dump in March of 2023 with all of the 2022 data, and I understood that there were monthly reports submitted each month.
That's correct, but some of that, the systems looked at that and they saw some of that as duplicate activity because where they had iLeads and Mark 43. That is what our technology has told us that was the issue that interpreted, because some of it they saw as duplicate data.
Okay. Why do we allow for agencies to be on a different system? Obviously, these are the problems that can create, and that data is crucial in so many different ways to this Commonwealth that it be accurate. Why do we allow that as a state?
That's not anything that I can answer, sir. There's no statutory regulation that they have to utilize KY Ops. KY Ops is something that KSP offers, and that's up to the individual agency what RMS system that they wish to choose.
Chief, why does Louisville Metro not use KY Ops?
From my understanding is that the RMS system that for LMPD, the capability of it affords us a little bit more in our day-to-day operations. Whether it's one or two action items within that system that we're able to do some additional queries with, that is what our needs are. But I would submit to you, it's truly upon us as a agency, whatever system that we use, because we've been using iLeads forever, and this has not occurred. And so it's incumbent upon us as an entity to ensure that how we are submitting the information is truly the information in which KSP is able to absorb within itself to make sure the data is accurate. Now, the dump that we submitted in March, if they wanted to go in to the system and change it, that system that they were, when we were submitted in March, and says, read it for 2022, it would have read the information accordingly. But because it did not pick up on that, that is the reason that we're being revised. And I think it's truthful that the information was off. So again, it is an individual agency need as to what we need to do in that system every day and the capacity. And that is why we are independent in using Mark 43. Now, I'll also to advise, I'm not opposed to exploring it down the road, KY Ops, and just see how we can do a better job integrating even not with our current system. So that's an option, then we will explore that accordingly.
Thank you both for the responses, and thank you for the latitude, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Bratcher.
Commissioner Burnett, who is responsible for accurate crime figures? And I know that they're fluid, and I know a report is only a snapshot. I understand that. But who is responsible for those figures to be accurate to best of your ability?
Well, it's we're just a repository of that. Any type of data, it depends on what submission, accurate data that they submit, and timely submissions, and then we formulate all that into a data form. Now we're responsible for our crime data, but this we're just taking that all in and compiling it and put out a record. That we don't analyze other agencies' crime reporting. And on this one, this was just simply a technology issue from taking all that in to be able to formulate the correct information for crime in Kentucky.
But if someone was to say, I want the official crime records from Kentucky, they would go to your report. Is that fair to say? The official, if there isn't such thing as official figures.
Well, yeah, that would be but again, that crime in Kentucky is only a snapshot at the current day that it's ran. It is consistently changing daily. So so that report changes daily. We are looking at some type of system to where Kentuckians could go in and look at that and see, as we receive information, that it updates it continually. We're exploring different types of software for that, so where it's just not one document at the end of the year or during the year of July when that's released.
Last question. Is it fair to say that if that TV station had not found this, that discrepancy would still be there?
I believe that would have come to light in conversations between LMPD and us after they had more time to be able to review the document, that they would have saw that their data wasn't correct. So I don't feel like that it would not have come up. We would have corrected it, and especially it would have been corrected because when we would have run crime in Kentucky for 2023, we would have saw that there was an exorbitant amount of crime and homicides for 2023, but it was because it wasn't captured in 2022. So it would have been caught. It's just a matter of what time that would have been.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Does any other member have any? Senator Deneen has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is for Chief. You said before you came to LMPD you were in Atlanta, and the Mark 43 platform had not been fully implemented yet, and it was just being onboarded at that time. So my question is did you have any data to prove or to justify the results of the Mark 43 platform and its efficiency and its effectiveness? And was that the only platform that was being used in the state of Georgia? Because I have, it's kind of, I guess the question I have is you brought that program to the LMPD as with experience, but yet you left there as it was being onboarded. So I'm wondering what data did you have to support that as a platform? And I will let you answer that question, but Mr. Chair, I do have another question for our commissioner.
Okay. With correction, I did not bring Mark 43 to LMPD. LMPD was already exploring Mark 43. So that is not correct on that portion. In Atlanta, we had embraced and onboarded Mark 43, and at the training academy, I was responsible in implementing training to all of the departmental employees and its usage with that new RMS system. And so that occurred in 2020. So when I left there in year of 2021 and came to Louisville was already in conversations and moving forward with onboarding Mark 43. So within that implementation within Atlanta, like with anything else, a new system, it is a learning curve. And so you also need to ensure that your old data is actually implemented into the new RMS system and making sure that those are cleaned and washed and make sure that there aren't any unnecessary duplicates of reporting with going into the new system. In RMS systems, it's only good as the information that you're putting in as the information that you're extracting. And so with our crime analysis, individuals have to make sure they're coding that information appropriately in order to receive the actual queries and the reporting that you need. So within APD, how I was working with them, how the systems, there were some glitches within that. However, I don't have any firsthand information as far as them falling apart over Mark 43 or whatever. LMPD was already moving forward under the previous administration when we arrived. So that's that on that portion of it. Again, training, implementation, making sure that officers know how to use the platform with all certainty as we go. If we have any issues or any glitches, we go to the manufacturer of that product and making sure that we work those things out, those nuances. That is with any platform that you onboard. And within the state of Georgia, Georgia has different all these agencies, and they use various platforms. Motorola, Axon, and all the rest of them are actually building out RMS systems. It's just that Atlanta chose Mark 43.
Thank you. Commissioner, in the state of Kentucky, are there any other agencies that are reporting to you that are not using KOPS right now?
No. Yes, sir. There is 4 in total. LMPD is one of those 4.
And can you name the others?
Yes, it is Winchester PD, Nelson County Sheriff's Office, and Owensboro PD.
And have you had any issues with Mark 43 from those other agencies, and how long have they been using that platform?
I do. Sir, I don't know what the reporting platform that they utilize. I just know that it's not KY Ops for those. But I do know that they wouldn't have the amount of data to be able to submit to us as LMPD. So we have, when this issue come about, that was hit between us and LMPD on those submissions, we did reach out to the other 3 entities as well, and I think they changed very little. Just like as we were talking about, crime in Kentucky is a daily snapshot, and those things are updated.
Okay, so the other
but they wouldn't have the crime. They don't have the offenses and arrests and all those things. The other 3 departments nearly as large as what LMPD's duties are.
So LMPD is the only one using Mark 43. Is that correct?
I do not know what platform the other 3 utilize, but I do know they do not utilize KY Ops.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, and I don't think any other member has a question or comment, so thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Chief, for your appearing on Zoom for us today and answering our questions. We really appreciate it and hope you have a nice weekend.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
The next item that we will take up is rapid DNA and DNA evidence due to one of the witnesses having a family emergency. So Representative Patrick Flannery and your guests may come up to the table and begin.
She's on Zoom.
Okay. Well, he has Lewis Kelly.
All right, thank you all. Representative Patrick Flannery, 96th District. I have with me today the Commonwealth's Attorney for Boone County, Lewis Kelly. Also appearing by Zoom is Ashley Spence, who is with a national organization that deals with this topic. I know it's a Friday and we are approaching almost 3 o'clock, so I don't want to take up too much of the time. But very quickly, what I hope to accomplish today is give this committee an understanding of what rapid DNA is, how the feds use it, how other states are implementing it, and hopefully just start the conversation on this topic and see what your thoughts are and maybe how we could use this in Kentucky. It appears to me this is something that we should consider using. Sister states are using it. The feds have used it. The Supreme Court of the United States in Maryland versus King has weighed in on this and has indicated that it is constitutional. About 10 years ago, I believe in 2013. But Ms. Spence this is what she does for a living. She's very knowledgeable on this topic, so I'll let her speak on this, and if you all have any questions for me, I'll do my best to answer them, but I'm sure she would be much better equipped to answer these questions, and then also let Mr. Kelly maybe give his perspective on how this could be utilized from a prosecutorial side.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Representative Flannery, members of committee. I'm Ashley Spence. I am the founder of the DNA Justice Project. I apologize I can't be there in person. My father is in ICU, but I'm here and I would like to share my screen. I hope this goes smoothly. So let me give this just one shot. Okay. Heavenly Francois, you are sentenced to nearly 138 years in prison. As I stood in the back of the courtroom and I heard these words, my head fell into my hands and I began to cry. I cried for the pain, for the justice that I finally felt after 13 years. I cried because I felt protection for myself and my children. But mostly I cried because I knew this man that you see on the screen would never be able to harm another person again. It was a moment I was so grateful for, but truthfully, it was one that I never thought I would have to endure. I came from a loving home. My parents actually just celebrated their 46th wedding anniversary, and they always made my siblings and I feel safe and protected and loved. They taught us to always look for the good and to be kind, but nothing, I mean, nothing could have prepared them or for me for what was to come. I was a 19-year-old college student about to begin my sophomore year at Arizona State. I went a week early in 2003 to get to know my new roommate, to move into my new apartment. This very photograph that you can see was taken inside of my apartment just mere hours before my entire life was shattered. My friends left my apartment, and I went to bed that night as I always did, or so I thought, thinking I was safe in my own home. But this night I wasn't. In the middle of the night, an intruder came into my apartment, smothered my face with a pillow, and began to rape, beat, and nearly killed me. When I realized that this was not a nightmare, this was real life, I began to fight with every strength that I had, and I was nearly killed. The pillow was smothering my face so tight, I was strangled and beaten so severely, and I knew I had two choices. I continue to fight, and I die, or I have to let it happen to try to live. So for hours throughout the night, I was raped and beaten. The entire time, I could not see the face of the monster that was committing these horrible acts against me. But I'm fortunate. Physically, I survived. My body trembled, and when he got off of me, he said, "Do not remove the pillow from your face until I am gone, and do not tell anybody, because if you do, I will kill you." You know, I worked day and night with detectives. I tried to go to school, but the fear was paralyzing. Was he sitting behind me in class? He told me he would be watching. If he was watching, then he saw it all over the news. He saw police at my apartment day and night. He is going to kill me. There were no leads, and I dropped out of school. It was too much. And I said, you know what? I'm moving to Newport Beach, California. I'm starting fresh, and no one's going to know. But, you know, that took me down a very, very dangerous path, numbing, suppression. But eventually, I got my life back together, and I decided I'm moving from Newport back to my home state of Texas. It was there in 2010, I got the shocking call. There was a DNA match after 7 years. So ironically, I moved to Newport Beach, California to escape this man, but in reality, I moved to the very city that he lived. When police arrested him in 2010, they found him on 41st Street in Newport Beach Peninsula. I lived on 40th Street in Newport Beach Peninsula all those years. He tried to break into a home where 3 women lived. A police officer saw him. He resisted the officer. In California, that is a felony offense. And thankfully, California was one of 18 states at the time. Now it's one of 19 states that shared the law upon all felony arrest, not conviction, but felony arrest, DNA is taken. So they took his cheek swab, they took his fingerprints, they took his photographs, they uploaded his DNA into our national database, which is called CODIS. And it hit and matched back to my case and others all those years before in Arizona. This man was a violent predator. He had a wife and a child in a shed behind his home full of women's underwear and ID cards from all over the world. I wasn't the first, and 7 years went by. I wasn't the last, but now he's in custody. As Representative mentioned, we waited actually on trial for 5 years, partially because we were waiting on the Supreme Court ruling. There is a very well-known case called Maryland v. King in 2013. They found that taking your DNA cheek swab, so minimally invasive, okay, a simple swab, is just a reasonable and just part of the booking procedure, just like taking your photographs, just like taking your fingerprints. So we went to trial. In trial, I never saw this man's face. He was a stranger. He was a stalker. And they were able to prove through DNA evidence that it was 38 trillion times more likely his DNA on me than anybody else's. 38 trillion. Technology had advanced, and they were able to do a testing method called YSTR. What they did was they extracted the X and the Y chromosome from the DNA evidence. When they did that, they found his DNA all over my body. And guess what? It aligned with every story that I told detectives and law enforcement immediately after my attack. So through forensic DNA, my team of heroes, the law enforcement officer, the prosecutor, the DNA analyst, the detectives that never gave up hope, my forensic nurse, he is now in prison for 138 years and cannot harm anybody else. I have justice, but all victims deserve justice, which is why I have founded my nonprofit, DNA Justice Project, where my one role is to go around and educate the public and policymakers on the value of forensic DNA, which is why I am so grateful to be here in Kentucky. There are statistics that show that 1 in 6 women in America will be the victim of attempted or completed rape in their life. But I want to tell you all, it wasn't 1 out of 6 in my experience. I kept this a big dark secret, and after trial, I thought, I can't keep this a secret anymore. I began to confide in my friends, employees, coworkers, family, and it wasn't 1 out of 6, it was 7 out of 8. 7 out of 8 of the young women that I knew, that I loved, my family, in exchange shared a story of an assault that had happened to them. This must change. According to RAINN, out of 1,000 sexual assaults, only 310 are reported to police. Out of that, 50 lead to an arrest, 28 lead to a felony conviction, and 25 to prison time. So let's break this down. What does that mean? Out of 1,000 rapes, 97.5% of rapists go free. We have to change this, and we have the power to do that. So, I didn't know anything about forensic DNA. And after trial, I began to study the database, study laws. I was very surprised to learn that all 50 states, like Kentucky right now, they're shown in the white. So every state collects upon conviction of a felony, okay? 30 states collect for certain violent felony arrests. And now 19, I help advocate for a law in Texas. Texas just became the 19th state, and we started collecting in September 1st of this year DNA upon all felony arrests. Now, why is this important? Well, as the law stands, say in Kentucky or Arizona, where I was raped and attacked, if my perpetrator was arrested today, he would still be out there free to rape and harm other women, because resisting the officer on arrest would not be an offense that they would collect DNA for. So I realized how important this was. According to the DNA Fingerprint Act of 2005, federally, any adult arrested for a federal crime must provide a DNA sample. This also said that they must collect DNA from people detained under the authority of the U.S. who are not U.S. citizens or not lawfully in the country, as needed. This beautiful young woman, her name is Katie Seppett. She was a 23-year-old grad student in New Mexico. She was raped, murdered, and her body was lit on fire, and she was dumped in a field just a few weeks after my rape, but in New Mexico. She didn't survive. 3 months later, her murderer was actually arrested in New Mexico for aggravated burglary, but they did not have the law to collect DNA upon felony arrest at the time. So he got away without giving his DNA. He fled to Mexico. We have no idea what acts he committed while he was there. 2 years later, he comes back to the States. At this point, they had passed the law, which is now called Katie's Law in her honor in many states, to collect DNA upon all felony arrest. He got arrested again for burglary. They took his DNA cheek swab, they uploaded it into CODIS, and it hit a match back to her case. Had they had this law early, her family would have had justice 3 months after her death, not 2 years. So this is another example of Katie's Law in action in New Mexico. There was an 11-year-old girl, Victoria Sandoval, and she was brutally raped and murdered in 2005. At the time, they did not have this law, but Robert Gonzalez was identified as a suspect, but he had very serious mental health issues. He actually was not stable enough to go to trial for 2 more years. And at one point, they said that maybe he admitted to doing it. So he went to trial. They found him guilty. But in 2008, after they passed Katie's Law, a man named Israel Diaz was arrested for felony burglary. They took his cheek swab, they uploaded into CODIS, our database, and it hit a match back to Victoria's murder. So not only did we get Robert Gonzalez exonerated, Diaz is now in prison for 59 years. So this works. This man, James Calvin Tillman, he is the epitome of what it means to exonerate people through forensic DNA. He spent 18 years of his life on a photo ID of a rape of a crime that he did not commit. The Connecticut Innocence Project, they pushed to have his DNA. Finally, 18 years later, they tested it. Had they had arrestee laws, he may have only spent months in jail. And had they had rapid DNA technology, which I will get into, he would not have spent 1 day in jail. So we must correct the injustices through forensic DNA. DNA databases are one of the most successful tools for law enforcement. So CODIS stands for the Combined DNA Index System. And as of November of 2020, they have produced over 637,000 hits assisting in more than 622,000 investigations. Now, what we know is when we continue to enhance the DNA database through these collection laws in a just way, right, we continue to get more hits, which means more prosecutions of the right people getting violent repeat offenders off the street. That is who we are after, not the low-level criminals, the violent serial predators roaming the streets of our schools and our communities today. CODIS, our national database, it's safe, it's protected, it's private. So it's been around since 1998, y'all. We have never had a breach in the system. And I think this is really important. So it's not 23andMe, Ancestry.com. I understand, people get a little worried. They get fearful of the DNA database, but let me explain what goes into it. So our DNA genome, it is made up of 3 billion markers, and markers are just sets of numbers. Out of the 3 billion, only 20 sets of numbers, or they call it the core loci, which you can see on the screen. There are 20 sets of numbers, right? That is all that goes into the system. It wouldn't say that I have brown hair, brown eyes, if I'm predisposed to any genetic diseases, what street I live on. It doesn't even have a name. It just has a specimen ID number. So even if there was a breach, all they would find was its numbers. The names are actually kept in an offline secure computer. If anyone violates the names in there, there is a heavy, heavy fine. If there is a match in the database, then the people at the crime lab release the numbers to the people that are ownership of the computer. They can only release the name of the suspect to the team working the case, of the detectives, right? It is used as an investigative lead. They have to build a case. They have to get a search warrant. From there, they collect the second swab. If that second swab is a hit, that is what is permissible in court. Now, you can't be precluded from having your DNA in the database, right? You can't not get a job from it, but your arrest record is public. The DNA database is not accessible by third parties. I also think it's very, very important. It is a federal law. You have to be able to have your DNA expunged, destroyed from the system if you are found not guilty. The Office of the Inspector General, they do annual audits, and they also do random audits. There is a heavy fine if you don't follow through when you're needed to. I believe in this so much. This is the back of my business card. I've handed this out from Massachusetts to Texas, Kentucky to Kenya, and I had my DNA profile done. If I were to be arrested for a felony or convicted, the numbers that you see on that screen, that is my DNA profile, but there's more info because it's my face, my email, my number. It is very secure. According to a Case Western University study, an overwhelming majority of both serial and one-time sexual offenders have felony-level criminal histories. 74% of serial rapists had at least one prior felony arrest. 95% of all serial rapists have a repeat offense, okay? So we have to get them early. When New Mexico expanded their database to collect for all felony arrests, what this chart shows you is the number of database matches by qualifying arrest. And I think the important thing to note here is, they were getting more hits in the database off forgery than something like homicide. The most prolific serial rapist of young girls in Colorado was caught through a felony level forgery. So we're not talking low level forgery, right? We're talking felony. This is a serious offense, but that is how they caught him, not by the raping of the young women. So DNA database, they also help with crime reduction. According to a 2020 study, in the first year after DNA offender database registration, they found a reduction in property crimes by 42%, violent by 60%, and weapon offenses, a big one, by 88%. We can save lives and save money. A 2-year study by the University of Denver found that for every dollar invested in DNA, you're saving $90 ultimately. Dr. Jennifer Doliak found that for every DNA profile entered into CODIS, which the kits, all in all, it's about $35, the taxpayers see $27,000 in saving. Save money, save lives. Now, there's one area that we struggle with, which is lawfully owned DNA. I was shocked when the Department of Justice said that state to state, so this is a nationwide crisis, on average, we are missing 40 to 50,000 of DNA that is owed to us per statute. So upon conviction in Kentucky, on average, 40 to 50,000. Well, why is this happening? Missed court orders, ignored court hearings, unclear status. Sometimes people flee, as we've seen, manual or flawed intake. Some people simply aren't told they have to have their DNA collected. Miscommunication among agencies or miscollections in prisons. So we really know that this is not just samples. These are violent offenders. This young woman, her name was Holly Casano. She was a young Illinois mother that was brutally murdered in 2009. She had a 2- and a 3-year-old. And actually her perpetrator was arrested multiple times after her attack, but he just blew off judge orders to have his DNA collected. It wasn't until 2018 through forensic genealogy that they caught him, but they would have had justice 9 years sooner had we collected his DNA as it was owed. So every single minute counts when we are talking about preventing the next victims of tomorrow. I'm really excited about rapid DNA technology. They can integrate with the existing fingerprint and biometric information systems to automatically process and enroll arrestee DNA at time of booking. The catch is you have to have the proper policy in place. So to be able to collect maybe upon certain violent felony arrests at booking in order to make this happen. So Louisiana was the first to go live here, but in 90 minutes, so it's pretty cool. It's a desktop size. It looks like a printer, right? And if you have the law to collect at booking for certain violent felony arrests or all felony arrests, when they take your fingerprints and the photographs in the booking station, they can upload a cheek swab into the cartridge. And in 90 minutes, it's a little circle. It can count down and it can check the most violent, unsolved crimes around the nation in 90 minutes. In 24 hours, we can check the CODIS whole national database. So this is groundbreaking. Something that used to take days, weeks, months, or sadly even years, we can do potentially in as little as 90 minutes. We can identify violent offenders. We can, take away potential flight risks that we're seeing here. We can eliminate and exonerate those that are wrongfully accused immediately. We can eliminate loopholes in the DNA collection process like lawfully owed DNA, which we discussed. And this could really help in the rape kit backlog issues. We can do all this work on rape kit reform, but we have to have the other point working, the other side of the database, DNA, to get the hits. So we can also prevent future crimes of our children. A Florida International University study found preliminary that rapid DNA creates increased database entries, which can decrease crime by 300%, which can help decrease the amount of work that the crime logs have so they can really focus on the complex cases, and it can decrease backlogs. So I was able to go, as I told you, Louisiana was the first up to do this. They are actually expanding now, but in the first year they had hits of over 330 arrestee profiles, and they solved cases such as unsolved homicide, attempted first-degree rape, and the attempted murder of a police officer. So they're expanding to more booking stations. I'm really excited because Florida is coming up next. Ohio, I did a working group in Arkansas, and then we got that through. So they are actually gearing up now to be doing that in Arkansas as well. So it's newer, but it works, and people are starting to catch on. And these are my beautiful babies, my children. When I advocated to get this law passed in Texas, I took them up to the Senate chamber and they got to hear the law passed. And I told them that, life can be very hard, but we do have the power to heal and use it to change the good. And I know the good is when we can maximize forensic DNA and technology, we can prevent our children from ever going through what I went through or worse. And I just want to say, Representative Flannery, members of the Kentucky Committee, I'm so honored. I wish I could be there in person, but I see this as hopefully what is the first step of many. And I would be very grateful to support this work in any way possible. And if I can answer any questions, I will do it to the greatest of my ability. And I sincerely appreciate your time.
Thank you. And Representative Flannery, you can conclude. I'm not sure if Mr. Kelly has any comments he would like to make.
I appreciate it. I don't have anything else to say. I'll let Mr. Kelly opine on this.
Members of the committee, I'm mainly here just to answer any questions that the Commonwealth or that the committee members may have as far as the prosecution's perspective. I will say that I think clearly, if you ask any prosecutor in the state, the thing that is the biggest impediment to resolving our major cases in a more expedited manner is awaiting labs, most commonly from DNA. So certainly anything that can expedite that process without sacrificing the accuracy and scientific reliability of it is something that we're very interested in. But certainly if anyone has any questions about specifics, I'd be happy to answer those.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Ms. Spence, for a very powerful presentation, very informative. Senator Berg.
Thank you, sir. Quick question, just for my understanding. So, when you're arrested in these states, you get swabbed, your DNA goes into the system. If you are found not guilty, you have a way of extracting that DNA from the system. So then, how is it there to help in other cases across the country?
Ms. Spence, do you want to address that?
Oh, Mr. Chair, yes. So thank you so much. Well, right now it's state to state different. So in Kentucky, you all collect upon conviction. So you're not swabbing at arrest. So it's a little bit different state to state. But if you're found not guilty, yes, they do expunge it from the database. You write in a simple letter. Every state does it different. Some do automatic expungement. Some you just submit a letter. And then they do destroy it if you're found not guilty. Does that answer your question?
I think it does. So basically, you have to be found guilty for your DNA to stay in the database.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Senator Westerfield.
Thank you, Chairman. With your indulgence, I just want to offer this one bit. The very first bill I ever filed as a legislator was Katie's Law. The very first bill I ever put my name on. I've met Jan Sepich a number of times, and we text from time to time, or used to, and I think she's now retired from her advocacy work. The most compelling part of her testimony, and she has testified in front of this committee, I think twice, once for sure, back in 2013, but I think a time after that. The most compelling thing about her testimony, and you hit on this a little bit, ma'am, in every single state where it has taken them more than one session, more than one legislative shot at getting it passed, in every single one of those states, there's a list of people whose lives might have been saved had they passed it the first time. Because that offender's DNA was identified and matched in every single state. And her slide deck at the time had, here are the cases in this state that we might have been able to prevent had we had this on the books a year earlier than we did, or however many years earlier than we did. So I think it's fantastic. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. Senator Carroll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Senator Westerfield, I was trying to remember, I knew that we had a bill previously. I just didn't remember the facts surrounding that. Representative Flannery, my understanding is with the rapid DNA, there has to be another test ran confirming if there is an arrest, correct? This is not the final DNA that would, yeah.
I believe so. I'm not positive on that.
Yeah, that's the way I've always understood it. It's just it's evidence. Then there has to be a final.
That's right. The investigating
DNA.
agency is informed of a hit. So it's just an investigative lead. Yeah. If they want to get a DNA sample to confirm that hit, they've got to get a warrant. They've got to go through all the same procedures to get that DNA sample and then do a whole nother sample.
Yeah. And this acts as probable cause.
That's right.
For that warrant.
It's essentially helps get a match to get a lead to further the looking into it for causation for an arrest.
I had the opportunity in my career to work a serial murder case, and so this kind of brings it home on, and this was back years ago, so it's not, DNA wasn't even available at that point, but the families that were affected by that, and I think the suspect in the case I worked, he had murdered 7, maybe, if I'm not mistaken, over a 3-state area. And as an investigator, what a tool to have. And my hope is that we'll be able to get this through. My final question is, have you checked on the statistics with what we're doing now upon arrest? And are we getting samples as we should? Are there other steps that we need to take as a legislature to make sure that that's happening?
I'm not aware of the statistics. I do know that I believe every felony conviction has to go to probation and parole. And I'm speaking with Mr. Kelly. I know even on diversion cases, so if it's a felony diversion and they're not sentenced to any active time, they still have to go and do that. But I
wonder if there's a report that's confirming these numbers or checks and balances on this.
There could be one, but I'm not familiar with it.
Okay. Yeah, it's only valuable if we're actually doing it, and sometimes as a state we have a tendency, if things aren't checked upon regularly, they seem to not happen sometimes. So just a thought. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Turner.
You are correct. As a criminal defense lawyer, I walked a young lady in the other day that got convicted of felony. First thing they do when they get on probation or parole, they get a DNA swab, and they give them a few days to get clean if they've got any marijuana in their system. But they do a DNA swab. As soon as walked out of the courthouse, they send her straight to I had to take her straight to the probation parole, and they do a swab. That's the process.
I guess what I'd really like to amplify so there's not any confusion, really what Ms. Spence is proposing, this is at the booking. So some states do it for all felonies, some choose to do it for certain violent felony offenses. We're already doing this post-conviction in Kentucky with probation and parole, so really what's being proposed is to do this on the front end. And, you know, there's different ways of doing that. Are we going to do it for all felonies? Are we going to do it for certain classifications of felonies? I think that's really maybe what we need to be discussing, but it's really at the booking, just like you would get fingerprints. They take a photo ID, things like that. You know, certain height, weight, whatever they do at booking.
Senator Schickel.
My question's been answered. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Deneen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank Representative Flannery. This very topic has been on my radar all summer. So much so that I visited KSP's crime lab to look into whether or not we had the capability and the staffing necessary to do this very thing. I'm full-heartedly behind this. I believe it will save lives, because I believe there's opportunities to collaborate with other states when they get into CODIS, and that we can solve and prevent many crimes and release those that have been falsely accused. One side of this I did discover on my visit to the KSP Crime Lab. We do have a DNA testing facility there, but this would require probably an investment of additional equipment there and staffing. And one of the things that I am aware of here in Kentucky, as our KSP Crime Lab trains those members to take on those jobs, they are frequently poached by surrounding states as they are trained. Surrounding states have higher pay or better benefits, and we are locked into a turnover rate of potentially trained staff members that we lose. We lose to Tennessee or Ohio or Indiana. And I would say that what we also need to do is maybe have something in our KSP training facility that those that enter that program are committed to serve the people of the Commonwealth for a period of time before they are allowed to compete and go to another state. So I would encourage further things along that line, but I'm very encouraged by this, and I believe it is needed. And so thank you very much.
Thank you. Any response? Or
I guess the only thing I would add, I actually asked Mr. Kelly about this. I think if we do kind of go with this, I think one of the things we'll need to figure out is who's really in charge of administering these at the booking level. KSP going to be involved, or they're going to be more regional setups? Is it going to function similar, like an intoxilizer? And I don't know the answers to all that, but I would be curious to see what other states, how they do that to actually do the testing at the booking level to be sure that certain safeguards are put in place and that it could be utilized properly. But I guess we'll cross that bridge when the time comes. But if there's not any other questions for me or Ms. Spence, I'd give Mr. Kelly an opportunity to speak on this.
Nothing really further to add other than to say we just appreciate the committee considering this and Ms. Spence educating us on this, and certainly any tools available that we have in our toolbox to figure out who did it and do that in a timely manner is always welcome.
Senator Deneen, you have a follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a follow-up, just a statement. I think when Senator Westerfield, I think when you proposed your bill, when you arrived here in the Senate, I think the one thing that may be different than that is included in this proposal that may have not have been in yours was the issue of expungement from the system upon being found innocent. I'm not sure. I think that topic was brought up, and I think that may be an addition to your original bill that is a part of this one. So I just wanted to make that point.
I'm going to take a question from Senator Carroll, and then we're going to have the Department of Public Advocacy come up. I have Melanie Lowe listed on the agenda to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do we know, are there any other legal challenges pending in relation to these tests, any particular aspects that are being challenged beyond the scope of the Supreme Court ruling?
I'm not aware of any. The Maryland versus King was decided in 2013, so that was about 10 years ago. I will say that the makeup of the court has changed a little bit since then. It was actually kind of an unusual 5-4 split, so maybe Ms. Spence might be aware of current challenges.
Mr. Chair, there aren't any right now, but it was upheld in 2013, and I know that there have been discussions of it, but as it pertains to rapid and felony arrestee collecting, there are not any right now, any challenges that I am at least aware of. So,
and Senator Carroll, to the extent that this would require a second DNA test, I know like currently for county attorneys, when they prosecute DUIs, which Commonwealth attorneys do certain, this is almost like a PBT, which in a PBT we're not allowed to say what the result is. We're allowed to say there's the presence of alcohol, or I recently prosecuted a case involving shell casings, which went into the NIBIN database, which just sounds the rapid DNA based testing seems like that. We're not allowed to say it's a match. We're allowed to say we got a result. That result gave us cause to then submit it to the ATF, which then we were able to get a result. So even if there were limitations placed on what we could state in court as to what this result was, in terms of just giving us probable cause, I don't know that we would have a lot of objections, at least from the Commonwealth side, if we have to eventually get a test like we normally would that has been upheld.
Okay. And if we move forward with this, I think the legislation would probably have to include the processes to be able to get a fiscal note as we move forward. And I'm glad this is coming up again. I think it's something that's badly needed. You just think about things that happened over a career and in the lives that could be affected, saved. If the ruling is there's no reason for us not to move forward with this. I think it's worth the investment without question, and I appreciate your efforts, all three of you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Melanie Lowe, if you would come forward, please. Thank you. You can introduce yourself and begin.
My name is Melanie Lowe. I'm General Counsel with the Kentucky Department of Public Advocacy. I won't present that I am an expert as it relates to DNA. My history with DNA, I worked with the Department of Public Advocacy for a little over 23 years. I was a staff attorney with the Kentucky Innocence Project, and I also had an opportunity to work with the Kentucky State Police whenever I was there as a staff attorney. One of my primary duties was to work with the laboratory folks as they went to court. I had an opportunity to see a sample being processed at the Kentucky State Police Lab in 2019 when they first acquired the Andy rapid DNA apparatus at the Kentucky State Police Lab. And so I am familiar with rapid DNA. It's my understanding that one of the issues with rapid DNA is that in order for the actual profile to be uploaded to CODIS, federal law requires that it be performed by a licensed lab. The only licensed lab in Kentucky is the Kentucky State Police Laboratory. It's not eligible a rapid DNA that would be done at an unlicensed lab or at a booking facility would not be allowed to be uploaded into CODIS due to the federal law. That's my understanding. That was the state of the law at the time that we acquired the Andy apparatus at the Kentucky State Police Lab, and I got an opportunity to review that. The reason behind that is there's been some worldwide analysis and numerous studies done as it relates to rapid DNA, and rapid DNA has a much higher incidence of reliability once it's done by laboratory staff who have the training to be able to identify any irregularities or problems with the DNA analysis is performed largely automatically by the machine that processes the samples. So that's obviously concern. If that's changed in the federal law, I'm not aware of it, but again, I'm not presenting that I am. I wasn't 100% sure when I was invited to come here exactly what the legislation would be that was being proposed. Obviously, as the Department of Public Advocacy representative, we represent people across the state who are charged with crimes. Many of them that are arrested are later determined to be innocent. And taking an individual's DNA and placing it in the system is one other way that we do that without due process. And the states, there's a myriad of different laws that relate to this across the United States. So for the states that actually have arrestee DNA taken, those states, some of them do it on a violent crime basis. Some of them do it for all felony crimes. And those states are going to be different than Kentucky. In Kentucky, we have some crimes that give me pause about taking someone's DNA and adding it to a database. Those would be things like thefts from a motor vehicle. If my child borrowed a vehicle and ended up being charged and arrested, and it was they figured out later that it was a misunderstanding whether he had permission to drive the vehicle or not, his DNA would already be in the system, and then we would have to go through the process of attempting to extract it from it. When I worked with the Kentucky State Police as an attorney with their legal services branch, we had to review requests to remove things from the state CODIS database, and it was quite a process to get that removed. So I do think if the state is considering this kind of legislation, it would be important to bring in the other partners, individual agencies who would be doing those samples. That would be done, I would assume, at the jails right now for our samples that are taken from people who are convicted. That's done by probation and parole. It is a buccal swab. It's a swab that's rubbed in the cheek. But obviously that could be done in other settings, but we would need those partners at the table to talk about the limited resources that they already have. I know the jailers struggle to process people in and out, to get our people in to see clients and asking them to do cheek swabs upon arrest, because individuals would have to be trained in the very limited nature of that process. Additionally, the federal law does require that the expungement process in the individual states complies with the federal law. I'm certainly not familiar with what that is, but I'm not sure if Kentucky's does. So I do think that would be something to look into as to whether our expungement process fits the federal requirements and would allow the state to have an arrestee database under that case law. I would also caution that bigger isn't always better. Arrestee DNA has been taken in Great Britain for a number of years, and what they've found is sort of diminishing returns over a period of time in which the database gets larger, but the sheer number of hits doesn't go up at the same rate. In fact, it tends to level off with the increasing size of those databases. The other thing that I would say is another partner we want to make sure is consulted about this is the State Police Laboratory. As the Senator pointed out, they have a tough time keeping staff, and their use of rapid DNA is still in its early stages. They haven't been using it for a long time, but they do have to train people to do it in order to have those samples taken consistent with the process and be able to be uploaded to CODIS as the federal law would require. I'm happy to attempt to answer any questions that you may have about what I've said. Obviously, the department objects to this from the standpoint of due process. In some states, the arrestee database, the arrestee swab is not taken until after at least a probable cause finding. And so I think it would be interesting to determine whether or not those states are having, that's having a significant impact on their way to use this tool to try to solve crime. But I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have that you think might be helpful.
Thank you for your testimony. We appreciate it in the
Yes, sir.
position that you're taking here. I think probably on a Friday, Senator Carroll, very briefly, I think on a Friday afternoon, we probably need to move along to our next topic.
Just quickly, you talked about, so someone has to be certified to actually take the swab.
So,
Why would that be any different from if you get a search warrant? I've taken probably hundreds of swabs, and why would this be any different? I had training as an investigator, but why is this different?
It's not different in any way other than the turnover at, for example, a local jail would require that part of their process is to bring people in and train them in the proper way to take a swab. They can be very easily contaminated with the individual who's taking it, or if they're not stored properly prior to sending it to the primary lab that's going to run the sample. But there are some safeguards in place, and there is a process, and I'm not saying that it's complicated, but it does require that the individual understand the ways to avoid contamination of those samples in order for it to be worthwhile to take those samples in the first place.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, and also thank you, Ms. Spence, for joining us as well. And prayers for your dad in ICU. Hopefully he has a full recovery, so you have our prayers. Our next item will be transfer on death deed. Representative Steve Rawlings, who's a member of the committee, and if he would go to the table and bring his guests forward, and they can introduce themselves and proceed.
Representative Steve Rawlings, District 66.
John McGarvey, Legislative Liaison for the LRC to the Uniform Law Commission.
You've given me quite an assignment after such a compelling and powerful presentation. So this is about a bill that I've to me was constituent driven, and we've heard from a lot of people around the state on this legislation being passed. It's a two-part bill. The first part, and I'll cut it a little short because of time. The first part is a transfer on death deed, commonly called a TOD, T-O-D-D. Transfer on death deed. It allows individuals to pass real property, which can be their home or their motor vehicle, to a beneficiary upon their death. This provision would assist elderly citizens of the Commonwealth or individuals with moderate to low household income, since this would provide a simple, cost-effective means of passing our homes and autos to a beneficiary without probate, outside of probate. Because the transfer occurs through the deed itself and is made effective upon death, the transfer is not part of the probate process, and it does not need to be listed in a will. Therefore, using a transfer on death deed can be a cost-effective tool in an estate plan. Kentucky currently allows this type of transfer for funds held and payable on death bank accounts. However, there's no similar means of passing real estate or an auto to a beneficiary. According to a survey completed by the Texas Tech University School of Law, 29 states already have enacted the transfer of real property on death provisions, and so now it's at least 29. These 29 states include all of Kentucky's surrounding states save for Tennessee. The second part of the bill request sunsets the inheritance tax for deaths occurring on or after July 1st, 2024. These provisions are found at the end of the bill in Section 24 at the very end. The Kentucky inheritance tax poses a particularly demanding and burdensome financial obligation for certain beneficiaries. Kentucky is one of only 6 states that still impose such a tax. Just yesterday in our legislative email, we had a message from the Tax Foundation, Catherine Lowhead, and she recommended reducing our reliance on the inheritance tax in Kentucky, which can break up businesses, penalize bequests to more distant relatives, and encourage wealthy individuals or their beneficiaries to move out of the Commonwealth. She highlighted it as a potential improvement that would make a lot of sense for Kentucky. And of course, I agree with her, and I hope that you all will agree with her too. So I'm really pleased and honored to have Mr. McGarvey here, and we have Trish McAllister from the great state of Texas who's on Zoom. And so would you like to have Mr. McGarvey first?
Mr. McGarvey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Representative Rawlings, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I come to you again as your legislative liaison to the Uniform Law Commission. I represent no interest that's attempting to push this bill. Let me give you just a little bit of background. The concept first came up in the state of Missouri in 1989, where it has been the law since then. The Uniform Law Commission started looking at this issue in 2007 and went through our usual process of appointing a study committee to define the issues, what problems will resolve. We decided it was a problem we needed to address. We appointed a drafting committee in 2008 that consisted of academics and practitioners from the real estate area, the tax area, the title insurance area, to come up with a bill that was offered to the states in 2009. Since then, we've got one more than what Texas Tech found. We have 19 states that have enacted verbatim the Uniform Law Act. We have 11 more that have enacted what we call substantially similar, which this bill would probably be because it extends itself into the area of motor vehicle titles. And of course, the Uniform Law Commission doesn't take a position on the tax issue. That's up to you all as a matter of public policy. The first 14 sections of this bill, I've read the bill, basically repeat the Uniform Act. The remaining sections do a couple of things. They coordinate other areas of Kentucky law that need coordination should we pass the Uniform Real Property Transfer on Death Act. They get into the area of motor vehicle titles and just expand the concept logically there. And then we have the tax issue. What I would suggest to you is that people who have substantial estates, wealthy people, already handle this issue. They do it through trusts. The ordinary Kentuckian is not going to pay a lawyer to devise a trust for the assets that they have because it simply is not cost justified. This gives the ordinary Kentuckian the ability to transfer real property on death in the same manner as it might be done through a trust by a more wealthy individual. I think it's good legislation. I commend it to you. I'm prepared to answer your questions.
Thank you, Mr. McGarvey. I want to recognize Trish McAllister for any comments that she may have before we go to our questions. And I think she's on Zoom, is that right?
Yes.
Hi, yes, I am. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, members, for giving me the opportunity to talk with you today. My name is Trish McAllister. I'm a Texas attorney, and I am the former executive director of the Texas Access to Justice Commission, which was instrumental in getting the transfer on death deed passed in Texas. Just as some brief background information on the bill that was passed in Texas. In 2014, the Speaker of the House was then Joe Strauss, and he charged the House Judiciary and Civil Jurisprudence Committee with studying issues that hindered the use of wills and access to the probate process in Texas, particularly for low-income individuals. The Texas Access to Justice Commission was invited to report on access to probate issues by the poor, and afterwards, a state legislator Jessica Farrar convened a work group of probate attorneys, judges, professors, real estate attorneys, bankers, access to justice leaders, a whole group of people to work on recommendations for improvement to the probate process. And the transfer on death deed arose from their work. And in my role as the executive director of the Texas Access to Justice Commission, I work with the state legislators to get that bill passed. The commission was interested in the transfer on death deed as an access to justice issue. The family home, a car, money in a bank are usually the only valuable assets that low-income families have. Yet they don't have the funds to get a will, much less probate that will, which at the time was the only mechanism to pass clear title to heirs. And for these folks, property passed informally, which often led to cloudy title issues due to multiple families members co-owning the property. And when ownership becomes unclear, it becomes difficult to sell the property, to qualify for tax exemptions, to receive property insurance benefits, to make needed repairs after a storm, or obtain a loan to make improvements. So for example, say a disabled child is living in the family home and then gets behind on property taxes, causing the home to be foreclosed. If the title had been properly passed to that home,
the property tax disability exemption would apply and no taxes would have been owed, so that disabled adult child could continue to live in the family home rather than it having been foreclosed. Consolidating ownership through a probate process can be costly and complicated, and families just don't have the funds for that, so they tend to abandon the property, which can lead to blight and all sorts of other problems for communities. But a transfer on death deed allows people to affordably and efficiently pass clean title to real property outside of probate from one generation to the next. And in Texas, as I'm sure as the same in Kentucky, many assets, including those with high dollar values, life insurance proceeds, 401k plans, brokerage accounts, etc., pass outside of probate. And the real benefit of a TOD is that it serves sort of as a will substitute for real property, and it allows property owners to transfer real property to a named beneficiary upon the owner's death without the need for the beneficiary to go through an expensive or protracted probate administration. It needs to be completed and signed by the owner and filed in the county, reported in the county clerk's office in the county where the property is located during the lifetime of the owner to be effective, which puts everybody on notice. It transfers only upon the death, allowing the owner to keep all the rights of the property of ownership during the owner's lifetime. It doesn't give the beneficiary or the beneficiary's creditors any interest or right to the property during the owner's lifetime. It doesn't affect any rights or interests of any secured or unsecured creditors of the owner, and it cannot be used to avoid the debts of the owner's estate, which I think is one of the main concerns that legislators tend to have about transfer on death deeds, is that it's not a tool that can be used to bypass debts. The owner can name, one or more beneficiaries, as many beneficiaries as they want, and it is revocable as long as the revocation is in writing and recorded. One thing to know is that after the bill was enacted in Texas, the commission prepared a transfer on death deed kit with simple forms that could be used by the public to file a transfer on death deed or revoke a transfer on death deed. And since the transfer on death deed was enacted that session in 2014, or I guess it was 2015 actually, tens of thousands of people have downloaded that kit and filed a TOD. So it's very effective, especially for folks who just do not have the means to go through the probate process. The transfer on death deed has also become a staple for probate lawyers too, as just another tool in their estate planning toolkit. So it's well beloved by both the public in general, as well as probate lawyers. One thing I was very pleased to hear is that the Kentucky bill also includes a vehicle transfer on death, which is something that I regret that we didn't do during that same legislation that we passed back in 2015. We did subsequently do it, but in Texas, our legislature only meets every 2 years, so it took another couple of years to get that passed too. And it's very effective for vehicles as well, because as you can imagine, most vehicles, especially for low-income families, the value of that vehicle is much less than what it would cost to actually go through probate to get the title transferred properly. So, I think it's been a great tool, and I'm happy to answer anyone's questions if you have any.
Senator Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know who wants to answer this question, but I keep hearing, and it deals with cars, and yet I read section down 5. It says property means an interest in real property. And automobiles are transferred in the county court clerks by a title that's controlled by the Department of Transportation in Kentucky. Does this apply to only real property? Is it to personal property?
Senator Turner, there's a section of this bill that amends Chapter 186A to deal with the very issue you raise. Mr. Chairman, if I might follow up a little bit on the last witness. First, I agree with everything she said. And I'm amazed Texas didn't have cars, because everything in Texas is bigger. But apparently this bill was not. We do cover that. She mentioned the kit that they produced in Texas. Representative Rawlings' bill has the forms, model forms, right there in the statute to both do a transfer on death and to revoke a transfer on death. So that would be part of the codified statute in Kentucky. Also point out real quickly that as a bank lawyer, I already know certificates of deposit, bank accounts generally have payable on death clauses already. This is very similar to that. It's just expanding it to real property and motor vehicles.
Senator Turner with a follow-up.
Just follow up, Mr. Chairman, and it's kind of a statement and a follow-up, and I'll get into this thing more detail, but the forms of wills had to be approved by the Kentucky Supreme Court before they were being able to just given out to the general public, because we have a statute in Kentucky that says you can't practice law without a license, you're violating a statute. Okay, and this document is giving plenty of legal advice, and the real question I have is, I practice a lot of all kinds of law. If you advise somebody, used to be 3 years if you're a certain age, that if you don't deed your home to your children or somebody and you get put in a nursing home, you'll be deeding that nursing home to the nursing home when you get put in there. Now the federal government has extended that to 5 years. So none of these documents are going to take care of that, because you're making it a avoidable document later on down the chain. If somebody thinks that they're deeding that to their child and the federal government says, oh no, you can void that. So we're sorry that them 5 years don't start until it's a non-revocable deed. Somebody's got to give the people legal advice of that kind of nature. This document, I've read it, and I practice land law thoroughly, and I see a lot of problems like that somebody's going to have to take care of. It can't be that simple. It might be simple in Texas, but it sure ain't going to be simple in Kentucky under the laws that we practice. So that's my statement about it. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just trying to say it's got to be cleared up some.
Senator, one quick response to a very specific issue you raised, and that's the promulgation of a form. I can tell you that we already have forms in the statute that the Supreme Court's very aware of. Financing statement amendments relating to personal property, the form is in our statutes. Notices of disposition, the form is in our statutes. So the mere fact that we're publishing a form, I don't think will run afoul of Kentucky law. When you get into the Medicaid, Medicare issues, you're ahead of me. I'm not qualified to opine on those issues.
Thank you. I see plenty of problems that you got to be aware of as a practicing lawyer. So thank you.
Representative Nemus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Want to say, Representative, thank you for bringing this, and also thank you for bringing a constituent of mine. It's always good to see Mr. McGarvey. That's right. So Senator Schickel and I were up here just talking about how good this bill is, how practical it is, and well-reasoned it is, well thought out. We're looking at a lot of the draft, and the language is really good. But this is the type of thing that we need to be doing. We need to be bringing these types of improvements to make it easier for the little man and to reduce unnecessary government. And so, I want to thank you, Representative Rawlings, for bringing this bill, and look forward to supporting it in the session.
Oh, thank you, Representative Nemus. Appreciate it.
Representative Flannery.
Thank you all. I'd ask Representative Rawlings a question on this, and I can't find it in the proposal, but maybe Mr. McGarvey can help with this. Would an affidavit of death have to be filed in the county clerk's office to, I guess, give clarity to anyone doing a title search that?
I didn't see it. But
I don't recall. I've read the bill again this morning. I don't recall that, but I'm not certain.
The bill was supposed to account for all contingencies like that, so we'll take a look at it.
I guess what I would say is if someone is doing a title search and so you have clean records on that, I would think that would need to be done so there's not a clouded title. I'm interested in the concept. I guess for either one of you all, maybe if you could answer this. This sounds somewhat similar to a deed that includes a life estate. So how would this maybe be different? Because in a deed with a life estate, there's a person that will receive the property upon the death of the grantor who would retain ownership.
Or even similar to joint tenants with right of survivorship, except this is not going to be a spouse.
I can answer some of those questions if you like.
Please.
One of the things that in Texas, practically speaking, an affidavit of death does need to be filed. But it really depends on what the title companies will require. So, some of the title companies here in Texas will even take a obituary. just some formal notice that the owner has passed away so that they can feel comfortable transferring title. I can also speak to the UPL issue in that, I do know in another part of my role, I did a lot of research on UPL issues for forms in general, and forms do not in and of themselves provide advice, because advice is tailored to making a recommendation to a particular client on their specific facts. So, a piece of paper that is handed to multiple people isn't deemed, it's providing information, not advice. In terms of the, Medicaid, Medicare issues, we do have an expert here in Texas on that particular issue that advised the Texas legislature on it, but a transfer on death deed does not run afoul and will not cause any problems with Medicaid estate recovery issues or anything like that. But I don't feel comfortable providing detailed information on that. I just know that it turned out not to be a problem, but of course it was something that we were all concerned with as well. And there was one other issue that was raised. Can't remember one of the other questions.
The primary issue with the recording is addressed, and that's the fee the clerks will get.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. At the revocation, the life estate issue. So we had it in Texas. We have something called a ladybird deed, and it's kind of an anomaly for Texas, but it's similar to a transfer on death deed, but not exactly the same. And the reason is that a ladybird deed gives a life estate. A TOB does not give a life estate to someone. So it's different in that it gives the actual property over to somebody, and if they want to give it, once the new owner has the possession of it, they can give it a life estate.
They've got it in fee simple.
Right. They've got it as fee simple.
Yeah.
So the issue of life estates doesn't actually come up.
One follow-up, please, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, go ahead.
Are there advantages in utilizing this for, I guess, capital gains issues, or there's been comments that this can be used instead of a trust? Maybe what advantages could someone have by utilizing a transfer on death deed?
I think believe you take it at the basis that existed on the day it became your property. So yes, the answer to your question.
Thank you, Senator Storm.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. These other states that have these documents, has there ever been any issues with obtaining title insurance?
No, sir. I'm aware of that issue, and I'm also aware of the fact that the Title Insurance Trade Association has supported these bills in the past.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Burke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much, Representative Rawlings, for bringing this bill. I agree with the presenters that transfer on deed death, as well as the ability to transfer titles to automobiles, is of great benefit to low to moderate income Kentuckians. For many of them, they are not able to undertake estate planning, and if they do, the primary asset in their estate is their home or their vehicle. So to be able to help those families, I think, is fantastic. The point of contention for me with this bill as drafted is then lumping in the elimination of inheritance tax, because it seems to me that benefits a completely different group of Kentuckians. And since we're not really meeting our revenue goals at this moment so that we could move forward with the elimination of the income tax, it seems to me to be counterproductive for that to be part of this bill. So I hope that the Representative Rawlings would entertain some kind of adjustment to the inheritance tax portion. You and I had briefly discussed either changing the threshold from $1,000 to something like $5,000 rather than fully eliminating it. So I just wanted to bring that to the committee's attention, because I do think that it's a bit out of place in this bill, and it's something that would prevent me from giving it full support when I'd like to be a #1 cheerleader. So thank you.
Thank you. Any
thank you.
concluding comments as you have?
I'm amenable to that. If that was the consensus, Class B individuals, it's $1,000 exemption, and you're referring to that to maybe that could go 5,000. For Class C individuals, it's just down $500, and that's just nothing nowadays. So it could be adjusted in that way, or we could wash this out over time. The Class A individuals are the close family members, fathers, mothers, brothers, sisters, child. It could be expanded out each year if you wanted to do it that way. You know, we could do it over a few years. So I would be for eliminating the inheritance tax immediately, but I would be okay to converse about that and look at that maybe over some years.
And I think it's important to note with the Kentucky inheritance tax, it's not based upon the size of the estate, it's based upon the relationship of the decedent to the beneficiary.
Yes, yes.
And that's the basis of the tax, was because you were related in such a way that you're either an exempt beneficiary is Class A, and then of course increases as you've pointed out. Senator Storm.
I think I did have a follow-up. Have you all worked with anyone from Kentucky dealing with title regarding this bill, or is it just people from Texas and other states that you've discussed this with?
Just Texas to this point.
Thank you.
My comment was to the support of the bill, traditional support of the bill by the title insurance company primary trade organization. I'm unaware of any title insurance company being opposed to it, but I certainly have the contacts that I could check on that.
Thank you.
Think anybody else has any questions, any closing comments that you have?
No.
Senator Berg, I think,
okay,
does, so I'll recognize her.
Thank you. And I apologize because I don't know as much about estate taxes as I should to ask this question. But have we calculated what type of revenue we're taking away from the state if we enacted this now?
The calculations haven't been done yet. That would be part of the process as we move forward. So in 2022, it was $81.3 million for the inheritance tax. In 2023 fiscal year, it was $71 million. It's a little hard to predict because you don't know who's going to die and how much they have. You know, somebody could have $1 billion and really jack that price up.
Right.
But as Mr. McGarvey stated, the wealthy set their money up in trusts. So, you know, like the Todd is for the people that don't have that kind of money.
A follow-up?
Yes,
I understand the distinction, and I understand, what I want to make sure is that we're not setting up just an easier way for the wealthy to get out of any estate tax requirements that we may want them to have.
Yeah.
Because, I can set it up in such a way that the house is in trust and it goes immediately to my child upon my death and, bypass estate taxes that way. But we don't want to make it easier for people to do that if we believe in an estate tax. So I guess the question becomes, do we believe in an estate tax?
Well, the distinction, we don't have an estate tax. There's no estate tax, inheritance tax.
An inheritance tax, okay.
Yes.
Do we believe in that in this state at this point? Is that something?
Well, we're one of only 6 states that still have an inheritance tax. So, I mean, philosophically, I don't understand. I'd like to know who actually had the idea once you're taxed with your personal property, auto, gas, groceries, and who was it that thought, well, let's tax this guy when he dies. Let's tax him too. So I just think it's an onerous and burdensome.
How much are we going to give?
It's a really unfair tax. You're taxing someone who's already had that money taxed upon them. So my final comment was just to be that this was a constituent-driven bill, and we included both topics because it falls under the transfer of property on death. It fits that way, but I understand the distinction that Representative Burke made as well, and that you've made. Yeah.
Mr. McGarvey, I think you were going to make
No,
a comment.
the only point I was going to make, and it's almost a point of personal privilege, Mr. Chairman, I'm sure all of us, or most of us, are aware of Judy Taylor's death today. We've all had her cookies. I have, and just say we're going to miss her.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Thank you for mentioning that. I think that's the end of our meeting, and we've had a good,
Thank you.
good meeting today. So,
Mr. Chairman?
yes,
If I might just take a moment, I want to correct something I said earlier.
Yes, sir.
During the DNA conversation. I have not taken hundreds of buccal swabs or buccal swabs. Dozens would have been the proper response. Paducah does not have that kind of crime problem.
Well, it
Thank you,
depends
Mr.
on what
Chairman.
platform you use.
Thank you, Senator. Our next meeting will be Friday, November the 3rd at 11 a.m. At 11 a.m., so earlier. Everybody have a nice weekend. We stand adjourned.